Who would have ever thought that ratty old t-shirts would ever sell on eBay for prices like this? I wouldn't have guessed it. Tell me what you think about this video, and hit the thumbs up or subscribe if you do like this video and you find it informative. If you want to see other videos like this, go ahead and comment down below what kind of vintage clothing do you sell, or if you want to see another video like this, or comment down below what the heck kind of video you really want to see. So today, we are going to dive into vintage clothing and why it sells. And I've been selling vintage clothing on eBay for a lot of years, probably like 7-8 years. I started selling on eBay in 2005, and I have sold clothing and vintage clothing for a lot of years. My expertise is primarily concert and band t-shirts. So I'm going to show you the method to my madness. I would say, yes, this room is a mess. This is where I do my eBay stuff at. And I will say, if you haven't already, you need to invest in a really good steamer. This is a professional grade steamer. I steam all my clothing with it when it has wrinkles, and it works amazing. Not many people would ever look in their closet to think that something like this would sell. This is actually from the 80s. It is an REO Speedwagon bowling shirt, and it is a crew t-shirt, or a crew shirt. And what I did was I actually bought out a member. It was actually the guy that worked for REO Speedwagon for 20 some years and a bunch of other bands, and I bought like 150 some t-shirts from him. I also go hunting in thrift stores all over the place to find these vintage gems in thrift stores and wherever else, and personal collections. And I'm telling you, there's some really great money in stuff like this. Now, the one thing I am going to tell you is vintage clothing fits different. So you need to measure it and provide measurements in your eBay listings, because I'll be honest, this is from 1984, and the sizes were a lot different. This is a small, and it looks like a child size small. So you need to provide measurements of armpit to armpit, shoulder to shoulder, and the length of the shirt, or you will probably get returns. Actually, if we're going to talk about it, I think the biggest sale on a vintage item was a pair of shoes for me. And it was actually it might have been a t-shirt, I don't know, but the shoes were a Bart Starr edition canvas shoe, and I sold it for about, I think it was like $389 or $370 something, and I paid $2 at a thrift store for it. Probably the most expensive shirt I've ever sold, like t-shirt wise, was probably a original Live Aid t-shirt for like $215 or $220. But I have a ton of t-shirt sales that are 80s, 100s, 150s, $160 t-shirts. I sold the Mariah Carey t-shirt like from her first ever concert for like, I think it was like $150. So these items are in people's closets all the time. And when they have yard sales or when they donate them, that's when you find them. I think the biggest fear of vintage clothing to people that don't know vintage clothing is buying a fake. But you need to get good at this to tell if it's real or not. So like, I know this is a pretty old tag. And typically, if they're real vintage, they always say made in the USA. And typically, your old stuff is 50-50, 50% cotton, 50% polyester. And also on the stitching, you can really tell that it is old. A lot of the stitching, some of it's single stitch, some of it's not single stitch. But it should be a dead giveaway And a lot of t-shirts, especially concert tees and band tees, always have the date right down below here that's printed with the person that was made for or that made it. So, I guess to buy this stuff, you do need a little bit of experience. But the only way to get that experience is to actually go out and buy it. Because if you don't, you're not going to know. And so this tote right here is just full of band t-shirts. And I'm going to work on listing some of those up today. But some of these are going to sell for super good money. But the one thing you got to look out for, now the reason these are going to sell for more money than most is because these are actually t-shirts made specifically for the bands on a lot of occasions. They are exclusive band t-shirts just for the band. So typically, that's why those are going to sell really, really good. Look at this. Here is a ZZ Top t-shirt. Boom. Pretty cool. And year on this, I don't know. It might be on here. I don't know if it is, but it's Afterburner. So you can look at when that released and get it. But it's 1986 tour. So there you go. And it says Crew. So it's an exclusive crew member t-shirt. That's important. The reason that's important is because crew member t-shirts, specifically in concert t-shirts, well, they're worth more money. Let's face it. Because why do you think they're worth more money? Because they weren't released to the public and they weren't released to everybody. So they went ahead and made those, and there might be only a handful left in the entire world. But typically, other vintage clothing is worth money too. Like this is a vintage Indian print, and it is a vintage Woolrich bathrobe. And this thing will sell for really, really good money. You also have vintage jeans, okay? And I know this is a mess in here, so overlook that. But vintage Levi's sell for super good money. Here's a pair of vintage orange tabs in really good condition. And believe it or not, in the orange tab jeans, if they're ripped and faded, typically they're more sought after. But also the really old big E Levi's, those can be worth thousands of dollars. Typically, the main reason I deal in vintage clothing on eBay is because I love vintage clothing. I love rock music history. But also, not just that, but also I love kind of giving it a new home. And that's what I really love to do. Now, I can tell you, just from experience, that there's one problem that you face selling vintage clothing online. One problem. And that problem is, well, people that don't know what they're doing and they really don't know what it's worth, because let's face it, on those rock band t-shirts, there are no solds on eBay. I can't look up the price because no one has either ever sold one or there hasn't been very many sell because there's none out there. So how do I price those? Well, I price them really high. Sometimes $250 to $350 depending on what band it is and what the graphics look like. And I'll take a best offer sometimes, and sometimes I won't take a best offer because it's that cool of a t-shirt. So that's what I do. But the number one thing is you're going to face people not knowing what they're doing and selling those items for super cheap, which means you have a really good strategy. You would go on eBay, and when you're listing some of this stuff, if you see one like that, you would buy it and then resell it back on eBay. See, sometimes vintage clothing takes a long time to sell, sometimes months. Sometimes if you want a good price, it takes a year or more, because you have to have the right buyer come along to buy your stuff. If you sell it too cheap, you're not going to make any money. And it's really pointless to list a $400 t-shirt for 20 bucks and sell it for 20 bucks and say, hey, look, I made a sale. But you have to wait it out and wait for that right buyer. Now, I know this because I have a couple pieces. I've actually sold vintage clothing to Michael J. Fox. And I have a piece in the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville. And I think that jacket, it was a Johnny Cash jacket. I bought it at a yard sale for $5 and sold it for $100. And it sat on eBay for about 3 months. and then the Johnny Cash Museum decided to buy it and put it on display. Now you might ask, how do you clean vintage clothing to sell it? Well, sometimes I'll wash it and put it in the washer, but if I know where it comes from and I know it's been washed and very well kept, like these Span t-shirts, they were stored in a tote. They were washed before they got stored, and they weren't worn ever again. I won't wash them, but if they have some little cruddy thing on them, I'll use a baby wipe. Baby wipes pretty much get anything out, stains, whatever, unless it's a really bad one, and then you may have to wash it. But I always wash all my vintage clothing unless I know where it came from. Like those band t-shirts, they were stored clean and fresh, and they weren't dirty. Let's just put it like that. They weren't dirty, so that's why I didn't wash them. But I can tell you, it's really weird, the amount of money sometimes people have in their closets, and they don't even realize it, because vintage clothing is huge money sometimes. Now, all I can say is estate sales are really good, because people pass away or they go into assisted living, and that's bad. That's horrible. But that's the life cycle of humans. And as humans, we're some of the most wasteful people in the world. And we buy a ton of clothes and material things, and then we wear them once and put it in the closet. And a lot of these estate sales, you can find a lot of awesome vintage clothing that's in almost new condition because they just never wore it again, and they kept it for either material reasons, or maybe they had an attachment to that shirt and that's why they kept it. So you have to understand, you have to think a little differently with vintage clothing, because if you look it up on eBay, there may not be any solds, and you may not be able to find it anywhere on the internet for that specific t-shirt. I'm definitely going to do some videos on out in the wild while hunting for vintage clothing, and I'll do some videos like that, you know, maybe American Picker style videos. That's kind of my goal, and that's what I love to do, and that's my passion. I don't know if you like vintage clothing, or if you like eBay, or if you like selling on Amazon, then go ahead and give me a follow and a subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. And I appreciate you very much.